they had a little food with them, so they fixed a little bite to eat. And then the heat in the burning fire started suddenly to explode the stones in the fireplace. And debris flying all over the shack and onto the two men in the shack. And so they knew immediately that this was not a safe place to be. So they fled outside, huddled up against the wall of the shack, and spent the entire night in the blizzard, and then the next day returned home frozen and exhausted. So that's sort of the other side of life in Ellison Bay during that period. But the 1880s were the real boom period, particularly the first half of that decade. He was still shipping out a lot of logs, but he was expanding his businesses rapidly. So he was adding things like lodging and stables and farming, particularly hay, and threshed a lot of rye on his farms. He kept adding extensions to his house, we don't know how many, and extensions to his dock, and completed a new store and an ice house. He shipped thousands of pounds of fresh fish out of his dock. His stables were reportedly full most of the time, and his hotel was overflowing with guests during that period. He even had a veterinary surgeon living on his premises, available 24/7 for the community. So he was dabbling in a little bit of everything. And at one time, on the same day, here at the dock right here, there were 3 steamboats docked here unloading. It was the first traffic jam in Ellison Bay. So major change. You can see how things are going. 1882, the log building for the German Lutheran Church was completed and dedicated. And that, of course, connects with the Ellisons as well, because John Elliason donated the property. His wife donated money for the building materials and so forth. And of course, eventually that ended up at the top of the world in the Liberty Grove Historical Society, as the Liberty Grove Historical Society Museum. 1884, the mail route was extended into Ellison Bay, and Ellison was actively working to try to get the telegraph here. It took a lot of work. And he tried and tried again, along with S.A. Rogers and others, to get the railroad here, but never succeeded in those enterprises. But things were going well economically, but in 1885, things took a bad turn on the personal level. His wife Carolyn was forced to leave him because of drinking and mistreatment, but later returned when he promised that he was going to treat her properly. That lasted for about a year, and then Ellison told Carolyn that he didn't need her any longer to pack up her things and leave. She was 58 years old at the time and in feeble health. He immediately posted a newspaper warning that says, "Whereas my wife Carolyn has left my bed and board without just cause or provocation, all parties are hereby prohibited from harboring or trusting her on account as I will pay no debts of her contract." No, thanks. Carolyn then sued for divorce. Ellison initially denied her charges, but later withdrew his denial and simply failed to appear at court for trial, and he was ordered to pay a pretty sizable sum for the time to her in alimony, and that was $1,000. From there we move into the last stage, which was really about his health in the last years. Although he suffered from rheumatism a little in the 1880s, he was pretty robust health through the 1890s. Somewhere during that period, he abandoned both liquor and tobacco, and later, in his later years, said that was the reason he lived as long as he did, as he made that decision during that period. But then we get to 1901, and a serious event occurred. He was walking home from Ruckert's store, and he suddenly stopped and he began to totter. It looked like he was going to collapse, and Charlie Ruckert was looking out the window and saw him, and he raced out and he got to him just as it looked like he was going to collapse, and held him up. But Ellison was fuzzy, he was confused. He didn't even recognize his friend Charlie Ruckert, didn't know who he was for a while. Sounds like, what we'd say is symptoms of a stroke. But his faculties came back to him after a little while, and he said, "Oh, he's okay. But his friends were seriously worried at that time and expressed that worry to him. And he said, whenever it's my time to go, I'm ready to go. That doesn't matter to me. But perhaps because of this scare, I don't know, but certainly that same year he made a decision. He said, I want to go back and see Denmark before I die. So he put all of his property up for sale, but it didn't sell. And it went on and it didn't sell. And so finally he had to give up on that. And so what will I do with this property that I have? And his first idea was he was going something like a subdivision. He was just going to create small lots, and he was bringing more new people in. He was going to continue, that settler mentality. But he thought about that for a while. He thought, no, maybe I ought to do a park for this community. That would be a good thing. They would enjoy that, and then my estate would take care and maintain it, and so forth. But his friend says, well, these are nice ideas. Well, you need to write a will, write a will. And in typical pioneer fashion, he said, I'm not going to bother with a will. If I designate someone as a beneficiary to my estate, I'll outlive them. They'll be dead before it ever matters anyway. So he wouldn't do it, and he never did write a will, of course. But even in his last year, 1908, he was still business-minded. He had plans for expanding his dock, concreting it. He had plans to put a new warehouse there. Those things all came to be, but they came to be after his death. His estate took care of those things that he had started and took care of them. So September 25th, very close to our time period here in 1908, he just complained of not feeling well and brought friends in and a physician, and the very next day, quietly passed away and was buried not far from here in the Lutheran cemetery. His place secure as the historic founder of this area. And I just want to make one last thing to you. Just think about this. For Ellison Bay, he was the man who established the first residence here. Listen to this list. The first pier, the first general store, the first logging camp, the first fish station, the first hay and grain operation, the first ice house, the first hotel, the first saloon, the first post office, the first church, and the first veterinary service. A pioneer and settler to the utmost there. So, a little view of his life, and now a chance to see where it all began. Right
Thank you.